Something that's happened the last couple of years that you've got to have your finger on the pulse is more and more clinicians opening private practices or going out on their own, which means more and more individuals are getting to have their preference of what EMR they do, but they have to solve a problem that maybe either an organization they used to work for would just solve, and now they've got to be a really smart consumer. Are you having more of those conversations in the last couple of years? They do that.
Anyways, yeah.
So one of those problems that could stunt the growth of a business or a practice is bringing people in, staffing. And I wouldn't think that an EMR would help with that, but you're here to tell me that I'm wrong, and I like when I'm wrong because it means I learned something.
Jimmy, you're wrong. There you go. I got to say it.
There it is.
I mean, I think any system you have in your practice, any workflow, any procedure that you're asking your people to do is part of this discussion with staffing. First of all, we talk to clients all across the country, practices all across the country every day, and staffing is basically a universal problem, I would say, at this point. I mean, I can't think of a market that we talk to where we haven't heard, I'm struggling with either hiring new people or retention. And, those are both different problems, but the same problem at the same time. And absolutely. So, on the retention side, to start there, if the systems don't work right or they're annoying, it leads to burnout or just frustration, or people say, you know what, I'm just getting tired of this. I'm doing a lot of stuff manually. I want to do more challenging stuff perhaps, or, just not that great. When you have somebody come in and they're sort of interviewing, or a prospective employee, if they sort of perceive that it doesn't feel super well run, or things kind of feel sort of ad hoc regularly, and they sort of observe that, and they can feel it. I think that, throughout the process, if they're sort of asking you like, well, how do you do this and how do you do that? And they, especially if they're coming from another position, maybe in another practice where they sort of understand how things work and they might be asking specific questions, they'll be able to smell it out pretty quickly. Right. And that can make it tough to really get that person to seriously consider, maybe taking an offer, or if you're just trying to hang on to somebody to stay.
Last time you were on the show, we were talking about baseball. It was the All-Star break then. And there was a situation with, what's that Reds player? Elly De La Cruz, right? So did you see this? He has like this weird like knob thing. The knob of his bat is shaped weird or something, right? And they had the umps check it. Like the opposing manager was like, check it. It kind of made him whatever. And they figure it doesn't do anything. Like the knob doesn't enhance it, but it's what he likes to swing with. It's what he's used to. So when you're talking about an EMR, if I'm coming in from a practice and I'm used to something, I want to know that the bat I'm swinging, because I know I'm going to pick that bat up and swing it a lot every single day. If this is new, I want to make sure this is going to speed my swing up. It's going to improve my swing and not slow me down. So that is something that's on top of culture or who you're working with. It's like, it's important. It's that pebble in your shoe that might drive people away. It's so minute, but the small things are the big things.
Yeah, I kind of think of it like if you're buying a new house, there's this intangible like quality of life everybody calls, quality of life. There's tangibles, location. It's on a busy road. It's on a quiet road. It's on a cul-de-sac. Then there's these intangibles. How does the neighborhood feel? Are there a lot of trees? Things that are sort of amorphous. And the same thing goes is when somebody comes in and like, well, we kind of just do it a little differently every time, or whatever. This is how the last person did it. We don't really know. Or, oh yeah, this is really time consuming, but we're having to do it manually. I mean, none of these things sound attractive. If you're sitting on the other side of the table and you're like scratching your head thinking, all right, is this what I want to get myself into?
No.
And if they have a choice, as is often the case now, then they can afford to take these intangibles more into consideration than maybe they would in other job markets and times when it hasn't been that way, kind of like a buyer's market versus a seller's market. It's a similar kind of concept. So it does make a big difference. And I think people like working, obviously, in a more modern environment. They like working in an environment where they're able to, the tools are helping them complete things faster, so their day isn't being extended. Things like that, especially when you start talking about clinicians. I mean, obviously burnout's a common discussion in the industry in general, and not just from a tech perspective, but just people burning out from treating or dealing with patients or whatever the case might be. And there's absolutely a role for technology in there to try and help alleviate some of those tasks, but also make it more pleasant to do them when you have to.
So I didn't think this was going to go this direction, this conversation. That's when we know we're on a good conversation, right? Let's say you have a job interview coming up, or you go on one in the near future. And I think a common question, by the way, you should be asking lots of questions if you're a physical therapist, right? You should be asking, you're not just there to read your resume essentially or field questions. You should be asking them. One of them, which I think gets asked pretty frequently, is, just out of curiosity, it's a lab question. What EMR do you use, right? You're looking for, am I familiar with it? Have I heard good things? How would you, if the person is unfamiliar with it, right? Let's say Jimmy sits down with a clinic owner and someone says, I ask as a clinician, what EMR do you use? And the person on the other side says, we use MW therapy. I shouldn't be done there because let's say I don't know about it, or all I know is just what I've heard. What's a question or two that that would be good to ask so I'd get a feel for what this tool that I'll be using every day is like?
Yeah, I mean, I think the two questions I'd ask is how long have you been using it?
Good.
And
So their familiarity, if there's a problem, am I going to be stuck solving it or you?
Yeah, and how's it going? I mean, if you're a therapist, do the therapists like it? If you're interviewing for front, how do they like it? Is it working? I mean, it's really that simple. And they might say, hey, we've been with it for 20 years and we hate it, or they might say we switched a year ago and we've been on cloud 9 since, or anywhere in between. I mean, and just like anything else, what's the interest in sort of, first of all, if the person says I have no idea, that might be a little concerning, right? Like a core system like that, you want to know what the core OS operating systems are of the practice. And then, because for some, again, technology isn't a cornerstone of the practice. These are becoming fewer and fewer, but it is. I mean, for any business in any industry now, whether you're selling, widgets or tchotchkes, you have to have a tech stack behind you that enables you. I mean, I even just think about the technology that goes into ordering a cup of coffee now. So talk about, pour me a cup of coffee. Now there's an app and there's a pickup line and there has to be a human waiting to make you the cup of coffee and put the sticker on it and put it. And it all has to happen within 8 minutes and the coffee has to be hot. I mean, same thing goes here. I mean, it's not just, and actually, if you'll give me a little latitude to pivot, I just want to say that another thing that on the other side of the table, the hiring side, really have to rethink what all these roles are. I think that this concept of like, I'm hiring a physical therapist used to mean something 10 years ago and now means something very different. And hiring a front desk person also. So 10 years ago, PT, I'm bringing a PT in, you got to be able to treat patients. You have to be clinically competent, right? And have, that might mean having the right education, however you want to measure that. But today, the PT is also doing probably some level of customer service, some level of patient retention, some level of technology, some level of reporting that they weren't doing before. Your front desk person 10 years ago, 15 years ago, can you answer the phone and take an appointment into a paper book? Today, they're your front end facing the customer. They're collecting payments. They're reconciling bank accounts. They may be involved in some or a lot of billing, depending on the size of your practice. So I think the big elephant in the room is always salary, right? Oh, how do you retain or hire more people? Oh, just pay more. And more people find out this is not working. You can't just add more money, more zeros. I mean, everybody has a price, but you can't add enough zeros.
You can, but that's a race to the bottom. That's a race to the bottom, right?
It's a race to a zero profit line. And also you're not going to retain people because honestly, they may be willing to take some pennies less to have a better work environment or better culture or better tech or lower commute, whatever it might be. But what I do find is that some folks still are thinking about salary ranges that align with what the role used to be, and less so what it. So I'm not saying add 3 more zeros on the end, which nobody can afford to do, but reconsider how much you're asking somebody to do and what the role really is. When you think about, it just feels bad to pay more because I feel like I should be able to hire this position at this price. And it all plays into the systems and the workflows. And especially if you want to really be, doing the heavy marketing and getting into all these different pieces and really having that top-notch patient experience, you have to kind of weigh everything into balance on that.
Yeah, starting with the 2 questions that you suggested people ask, right? Which is how long you've been using it and what do you think, right? An interview is an interview. It is two-way. Like a job interview is not you trying to win the job. I will say this until my grave, especially for new graduates. And I was just hanging out with a bunch of them over the weekend at a conference in Vegas, of all places. I can't tell you anything that happened there because I'm not allowed. Apparently, what happens there stays there. But what I was asking is, hey, listen, you guys are graduating soon, or some of them had just graduated. I'm like, where are you looking to go? I don't know. And my one piece of advice is an interview is not a thing to be won. It's not a sport. It's not a game. It really is a chance for you to by all means, make a great impression. That's what you should do. Put your best foot forward. Also, your job is there as an investigator, because you are buying something. I know you're looking to get paid, but you are buying something. You're putting your time in there. And even asking those two simple questions, what EMR do you use? Do you like it? This is a poker game, man. People will tell you stuff, right? I tell people, there was a line in radio or a cliche. If you give someone enough microphone cord, they'll hang themselves with it, right? If someone's going to admit to something, cops know this. Just shut up, let them talk. Human beings love to fill that space, but it's uncomfortable, especially if you're being interviewed. You want to just keep going and keep going. Ask a question and let it sit there, because their facial reaction, their response, let them keep going. Or, as you pointed out too, I didn't think about this, their lack of response or lack of knowledge to that question. But maybe they're in hiring. Maybe they don't know that at a practice, right? I'd love to speak someone who is more clinical. Could I do that? Is another great question too.
Sure. Yeah, and I think honestly, even their attitude towards answering the questions will be instructive. I mean, you if it's not okay to ask questions, it's probably not great. Yeah, and like you said, I think it's very much a two-way street, and it will also give you some indication about your ability to impact change, which a lot of people do value as well. People are interested in, I think this is my view, are interested in improving the organization they're a part of, and can get turned off if they feel like there's no avenue for them to do so.
Oh yeah.
And so they just want to know, and whatever it is, I mean, they may be coming to you from another practice where actually they had some good ideas or some good implementations or workflows on anything, and they could help if you let them. And so the interview is just the gateway to that conversation.
Do you want to hear one of the most ultimate cheat code questions that you could ask in an interview? This has been on the show before, and I stole it from, Jamie Schreier, right? You guys have
I know Jamie. Yeah,
Jamie had this brilliant question, and he asked me the question. I was like, that's pretty smart. And then he went into what he got out of it. And the question he asks as a practice owner to potentially hiring a clinician was, listen, man, Jimmy, you're great. If I were to hire you and you stayed with me for 5 years, but at the 5-year mark, you decided to quit, what do you think the reason might be?
Oh, that is a good question.
And it's such a good question, because everything that I say to the answer is what I hold dear. It's I just explained, or as a person answering that question, I explained the things that I actually need to see, or else I'm going to run out of steam, right? Yeah. So I love it because it's brilliant, because I also know, as a person who asks a lot of questions, if I said, Jimmy, what are your biggest values, or what are the things that are most important with you? I'd give a cliche. I would try to answer it and please you. That question is almost like in your periphery. It's like bouncing a racquetball off the wall, still getting to the same spot. It's not a straight shot.
100%.
And it puts it into a narrative. And all of a sudden you're like, yeah, you know what? If I wasn't able to expand the practice, maybe open up my own clinic within the company, that'd probably be a reason I would leave. Now, if you as the person hearing that answer, if you're like, I never want to do that, that person's not a good fit. You might get 2-3 years out of them, but they're going to leave. Or if you're like, yeah, I want to expand this thing, Jimmy, and there's a jump ball between Jimmy and someone else, that's the tipping point, is he wants it. Because you can't, and I'm going to curse, earmuff it for the kids, you can't teach give a shit. You can't.
Sure. Well, Jamie's a smart guy, so I'm not surprised he came up with a good question. The only thing I could add to Jamie's thing would be, we're talking heavily about on the hiring end, but that sounds like a great retention question too. I mean, if you do an annual review with somebody, ask them. I mean, why not ask them in year 3? If you're going to leave in a year or two, why do you think that would be, and what are we doing? One question I like to ask is, what do you want to learn? What is it you're interested in learning about, and how can I support you in learning about that? Is it something I could teach you? Is it something somebody else could teach you? Is it something you could take a course to learn? I know with clinical, everybody gets into big Con Ed, and you've got to make your hours and all that, but people have interests, and professionally, and if you say, hey, we'll support you, you might be surprised. A therapist might say, I've always actually wanted to learn more about how billing works. And you're like, I would have never guessed you were to say that. So you pair them up with your billing person like once a quarter, and they learn a little bit. Now, who knows, maybe they want to go start their own practice or something, but you know what? You get the time you can, and at the highest, hopefully, productivity that
Yeah.
you can. But you have to support people because in the end, that it is human. It's all human powered. So you've got to keep the machine going. And if they do need to leave for whatever reason, they need to leave. And you've got to then be in a position to backfill and move on. And I also am a big fan of cross training and making sure different people can learn to do other people's jobs. And that gives you resilience and things like that. So it can all play well together, but it's another one of those, I think you use the term zoom out, like back up for a second and just look down and say, okay, wow, Jimmy's been here for 4 years. We've given him no new responsibilities. He's really he hasn't learned how to do anything new in 3 years. What is Jimmy happy? And you might answer your own question before you even ask them.
I mean, I've been in jobs like that where I'm sitting there going, hey, and it's funny. It's when it's a lot of times it's when someone close to you like gets sick or you lose somebody, you start to do that self like assessment, like, what am I doing here, man? It's been 2 years since I had that rush of like, hey, I accomplished something, right? We get those dopamine hits of accomplishment every year, first grade, second grade, third grade, then we go to college, then we do this, then we get a job. And then those hits of accomplishment, you have to be the self-starter, right? Like, especially if you're, and I'm using air quotes for the podcast, right? If you're just a clinician, if you're happy doing that, that's your dopamine hit. But go be the best clinician ever. If it's something plus, if it's being a clinician plus a marketer, an innovator, something you're going to bring to it, sometimes you got to say that out loud. As a business owner, what you just pointed out is sometimes you should be asking that question, which is better than, what can I do to keep you? If someone's got one foot out the door, my man, too late, right? Like 3 years from now, what can we build to help you become a better version of you? That's a question because it's all about me, the receiver. Makes me feel like you're paying attention to me. I want to work with people who pay attention to me. That's what I want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really does make people feel valued, and they should. And I think, again, it's a win-win. I mean, if they learn a new skill that's also valuable to you, then as a business owner to the business, rising tide lifts all boats. By the way, for the podcast, Jimmy just lifted.
I'm doing the
was that raised the
roof? A lot of
hand
motion from the podcast.
Yeah, you need like a talk with your hands translator. So, but yes, I mean, I think these are all good things, and I think, everybody has opinions. I don't think the staffing challenges are going to go away, anytime immediately. Anyways, they're probably going to linger around for some time, and you've also got these other pressures from different areas, and so coming up with sort of viable, replicable, sustainable strategies that you can follow. Obviously, I think retention is super important, because if you've got time into somebody and they know what they know about your business, then you can say, okay, how do you get new people into that too? Go ahead. Yeah.
What I think it also does, and this goes back to cross training, goes back to the last episode we talked about, which is if someone full of energy comes into the organization, into your business, right, and they want to do stuff, right, and they've got new ideas, having them sail that idea in sort of a test environment, right? But now you're able to show them with data how this is going. Because a lot of times we shoot from the rafters. We drive from the back seat. Why doesn't this business owner doesn't do this? Which, if anybody listens to the show, the word just, my least favorite word in the world, just, because it minimizes everything. Why don't we just do more of this? Because that would solve everything. And meanwhile, the business owner is like, I see what you're saying, but from behind this screen, which you might not have vision on, I'm telling you it won't work, and here's why. Or it hasn't worked because of ABC. Now, if we can come to a compromise and you want to do that and you're motivated as an employee, as a teammate, we can do that. But it shuts people up real quick when you're like, when they're the backseat driver and you're like, hey, you know what? I'll move over. You could drive. Show me how easy that is. You just said it was really easy. But at least it empowers people with information. It says, okay, come help me sail this thing.
Yeah, it does. I mean, hey, practice owners, they're under a lot of pressure, a lot of opportunities, but also a lot of threats, and from all different corners, financial, operational, staffing, all these different pieces. But I think that the practice owners that are sort of doing the best are those that are able to balance across those different things, and actually in some ways make time, not just to handle threats, but to try and conquer opportunities. Because you could spend all of business just chasing the threats. This is going to come down, just coming down on us or whatever. Others, though, are saying, you know what, like I'm going to sort of not ignore a threat, but I'm going to take a little bit more risk on a threat to open up some time to really say, okay, this is an opportunity over here, whatever it might be, a new location, a new referral source, a new specialty, a piece of equipment. I mean, there are numerous ways that you can take risk on the other side to accomplish something new. And if you are able to get your team to, be in sync with that too, and to recognize, okay, like this threat is too great to ignore from a business perspective or even on a smaller scale, and then this opportunity is also too big to ignore or shouldn't be ignored, then I think you can kind of get the right thing. And for sort of mid-size and larger practices, a lot of that starts to come into the sort of middle tier of management, which is very important if you have it. I mean, a lot of practices are flat, the owner
Right.
and then everybody else. But as we see the proliferation to some degree of larger practices, there's an
Hierarchy.
owners, and then there's there's some sort of structure to the organization. And the interesting thing about that from a staffing perspective is now you need a farm team to be able to get people to come off the bottom level, move up to that middle, and then you're losing sometimes on the bottom, you're also losing sometimes in the middle. And so you've got to be in a position where you can have some new flow into all of those. And usually the best thing is if your farm team can deliver, like going from the minors to the majors. Okay,
Right.
hey, you're now running location 2, or you're now the clinic manager, or you're now this, and our business, our philosophy, our systems and operations, as opposed to trying to bring somebody in fresh into that middle layer, can really be beneficial. But these all now play together.
Yeah, you're empowering people. I mean, that's the way you get everybody to play together, is when I feel I'd rather play. I mean, I know we started talking about this, money, right? Because just pay people more money and they'll show up and that's it. Is it? Okay. Well, that doesn't work. I want to do really good work, right? I mean, we've talked about, I don't know if we talked about it together, but the 3 C's that we talk about, which is like the 3 common things that people want to get out of where they work, right? And it's never one. It's always a combination, but there's always one that's typically the lead. It's craft, cause, and community. Craft would be like, I want to be the best, whatever it is that I do. I want to be the best designated hitter. I want to be the best plumber. That's why I'm here, to be the best this thing. I'm a technician. Cause would be, why are we doing this whole thing? Why does this whole thing exist? Right.
Yeah.
And then community is like, who am I doing it with? Right. You might have a really important role, get paid a lot of money, have a great cause, but you don't like the people you're around, you ain't going to be there very long. So it's like all 3 are important. But when you can have a really good balance, and when you know which one is important to this person versus this, it's like love languages. That person plays harder and typically sticks around longer.
Yeah, totally. And I think, that's a good place to kind of say the last piece is you have to articulate these things too. You can't just how do you tell them to people? So, I mean, I know I'm talking about Jamie. I know he does a good thing about how to write a nice job ad and all that. And he's very good at explaining that. But yeah, how do you even communicate this? And if you're on the other end of the table, like you were saying, how do you communicate what you want out of those 3 things? So, I mean, that's probably something good for everybody to think about on both sides of the table. How do you say it? How do you
This
talk
is where Jimmy realizes that the thing I like to do, like communication, I'm gonna have job security. AI ain't gonna take this away. Not anytime soon. As I say that, AI is probably listening to me. But what I mean by that is, how do you tell someone about it? I say, don't tell them, show them. Because my favorite day in 3rd grade was show and tell. Every day you tell people stuff, but it was when I could stand there with my whatever and show people. And that takes effort. That's harder to scale. But with these things that we're doing now, sometimes it's not. So I've said to people, as soon as you brought this up, I started nodding, of course, because a lot of people will say, well, of course, we have these values. I'm like, where do you show me them? Well, they're on our website in our values section. I said, nah, my man, I got to see that on the street. Nike doesn't just have it in their values. I have no idea what Nike's value section says in their website, but I know what Nike values because they show me. They put Serena in that commercial, or they, when they sponsor this or they embed this, they show with every action. I mean, something you said before, every person in most small, medium, and I'll say all businesses, small, medium, or large, you're doing public relations. You're either doing it well or you ain't doing it, and that's bad, but everybody's doing it whether they know it or not. And that's more of show and tell. Show me. But if you give people the right tools and you make sure that they understand it's an expectation, a responsibility, they typically overperform. I mean, I got yelled at once at a job for not handling something that no one ever told me was my thing. And do you know why I didn't jump on it? I didn't want to step on toes. So here I am. It's like when you watch a pop fly fall between the shortstop and the left fielder. I didn't want to, it was yours. I didn't, just go. But you know what you could have done? I got it. They teach you that in like literally. I got it. But that needs to be said again.
No, 100%. And I think this is where that rethinking the roles comes in. I mean, you write your job description, and if you dust it off from 5 years ago, it definitely needs to be updated for any position in a practice. That's how you communicate. These are the things we want you to be doing. These are the things we expect you to be good at and do. And so, yeah, it'll be, again, interesting to see where the next couple of years takes us and sort of the very broad job market type perspective, but also in the PT practice realm. And I think, PT shortages and the things you hear about are to some degree going to persist, I think. And that's where, just like any other success in the space, is going to be governed by how refined you are sort of in your process for hiring, how you communicate, what you're communicating, what you're offering. Just, yes, of course, compensation is important, as we've talked about, but it's not the end all and be all.
It shouldn't be the only thing. Listen,
no.
pay people enough, but then you've got to deliver and make the worst is when organizations or businesses or companies are doing the things that people value. It breaks my heart when they're just not showing them. And I'm like, you mean you have a residency? Like, yeah, it's on the website. I'm like, my man, you got to hit me over the head 50 times. And then when you think I'm bored of hearing about it, you're 10% of the way there. I need you to do it again and again and again and show. Somebody had a great quote. It's like, marketing is saying the same thing 1,000 ways, not 1,000 things the same way, right? We got to hire someone. Go to Indeed. Totally. I'm not saying don't go to Indeed. I'm saying, what are you saying there? Great. Figure out how to say that on Twitter, on a billboard, in an email, in a text message. These are all delivery devices. Say the same thing 1,000 ways.
Totally agree. And I'll just leave you one last thought, which is not a negative one. Yeah. Well, here. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. Do you want to do parting?
No. Do that. I thought you had it. Go ahead. Well,
no, I was just going to say the only other thing that's sometimes hard to talk about with staffing is addition by subtraction.
What does that mean?
So addition by subtraction is if you have somebody that's dragging your team down, and you're keeping them because you're so worried you're not going to be able to hire somebody else, but you're actually risking retention with other people because you have to think about addition by subtraction. It can and does exist out there.
Sure.
People know who those people are, and it's really a tough situation, especially if your clinic's already tight and you're kind of struggling as it is. But everybody can feel it and everybody knows it. And sometimes you have to make that tough call. And we do see, unfortunately, sometimes practices and owners struggle with those decisions. And it's hard, but that's why try and call it addition by subtraction. Sometimes you can have greater, and sometimes it may just not include somebody because it just isn't a good fit, position, personality, all those sorts of things. So.
All right, last thing we'll do. That was your final thought, but now you have to do your parting shot.
Parting. Okay.
So I'll frame it up this way. We'll be dropping this episode as PT students are largely going back to classes, getting back in the swing of things. Let's aim at that audience. What advice or what thing would you have PT students focus on?
So, yeah, that's a problem.
Well, I think, my parting thought would be, know what you know and know what you don't know. I mean, when you're coming into the space as a new grad, of course, you want to do and be everything. I think that's the beauty of coming out of college in any position. But you do have to kind of put some time in, and then you can really figure out what you don't know, and then hopefully you're in a place where you can learn it. And they can't teach you everything in school, and that's not just PT, that's just everything.
Anything.
If you want to be in private practice, it's now you got a whole business side to it that you never really had a good introduction to or even a lot of detail on. And then know what you do know, which is, what have you learned from your clinicals and things like that in terms of what you do like and where will you be happy? And that could be the setting, big setting, small setting. It could be the type of care you're providing. It could be the type of equipment you even like to work with, things like that. And so I try and have an open mind, but also, don't put yourself in a lose-lose situation. And as a student, I think those are some things that coming out you can reasonably do. And then in a couple of years, you can reconsider and see where everything lands.
Always great insight, Sharif from MW Therapy. Thanks so much for coming back on the show, my man.
I really appreciate it. I hope to see you again soon.
Perfect.
Like what you hear? Tell a friend or leave a review on iTunes or Google Play.
The show today is brought to you by the Brooks Institute of Higher Learning, an innovator in providing advanced post-professional education. The Brooks IHL offers 7 on-site PT residencies, including orthopedics, women's health, geriatrics, pediatrics, sports, and neurology, as well as a neurologic OT fellowship, a competitive OMPT fellowship, and a speech therapy clinical fellowship. Therapists that complete a residency or fellowship through the Brooks IHL will markedly advance their knowledge and skills in a specialty area of practice. Learn more about how a residency or fellowship can help you advance your professional development at brooksihl.org.
Our home on the internet. PTPintcast.com. Created by Build PT. Build PT provides marketing services specifically for private practice PTs.
From website development and hosting,
Providing content marketing solutions
for PT clinics across the country.
See what Build PT can do for you today
At buildpt.com.
The PT Pintcast is a product of PT Pintcast LLC. It is hosted and produced by PT Pintcast CEO Jim McKay and CBO Sky Donovan from Marymount University. We talk PT, drink beer, and record it. This has been another pour from the PT Pintcast. The PT Pintcast is intended for educational purposes only. No clinical decision making should be based solely on one source. While care is taken to ensure accuracy, factual errors can be present. More on the show at ptpintcast.com.